Please stand as you are able for our reading from the gospel. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters for you, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said, "don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was a renowned 19th century poet, author, lecturer, abolitionist, and suffragist. She was born in Baltimore to free African American parents who died when she was just 3 years old. She was taken in by her aunt and uncle, who was an outspoken abolitionist and activist. With his influence, her opportunity to go to school, and through working for a white family who owned a bookshop, her love for reading and poetry blossomed. At only 26 years old, she left Maryland to become the first woman instructor at Union Seminary in Ohio, a school for free African Americans. Shortly after arriving, a law was passed in Maryland that free African Americans living in the North were no longer allowed to enter the state of Maryland. If found, they would be imprisoned and sold back into slavery. From then on, she knew she would devote her life to opposing slavery. She wrote poetry for anti-slavery newspapers. She traveled the country lecturing for multiple anti-slavery societies. And in one of her most famous speeches at the National Women's Rights Convention in 1966, as the only Black speaker that day, she said, "You white women here speak of rights. I speak of wrongs." The speech was titled, "We Are All Bound Up Together," and she would continue to fight the rest of her life for the rights of Black women, knowing that voting rights should be for all and not just white women first. Frances knew what it was to bring change, and she also knew what it was to bring transformation. In our passage today and throughout the Gospel of Matthew, the author is intentionally drawing these commonalities between Moses and Jesus. Moses went up on the mountain to receive the commandments from God and to hear from God. And Jesus had many experiences on the mountaintop throughout the Gospel of Matthew. He was tempted, he taught, he fed, and here he experienced the transfiguration. One commentary puts it like this: even this passage itself is something of a high mountain in the Gospel of Matthew. On one side, we climb up through stories of Jesus' healing, liberating ministry. And on the other side, we'll descend down to Jerusalem. This week, we arrive at a clearing on the mountaintop, and from here, we can survey both how far we've come and the Lenten journey ahead of us. In our passage today, we learn something about the mystery of transformation, or transfiguration, which can translate to metamorphosis. So when I hear that word, I immediately think of butterflies. I love them and am frequently enthralled by their metamorphosis process. Like, I love butterflies so much that I had a butterfly birthday party when I was little, and we got to tag monarchs during their migration so that they can be tracked as they make their way to Mexico. And it was probably one of my favorite birthday parties of my life. In the life cycle of a butterfly, the worm-like butterfly larva, or caterpillar, looks nothing like a winged adult, as many of you probably know. After hatching from the egg, the young caterpillar spends most of its time eating leaves and gaining weight. The caterpillar undergoes several molts of its skin until it becomes full grown and has accumulated enough body mass to carry it through the entire life cycle, including the adult phase. The caterpillar then enters the pupal stage when it neither feeds nor moves. From the outside, it appears as though the pupa, also known as the chrysalis, is resting. In reality, though, the larval tissues completely break down and reorganize within the pupal skin. And what emerges from the chrysalis is a fully formed adult, a butterfly. The butterfly's wings are initially soft and shriveled, but they expand and harden within just a few hours. And then they take flight to pursue all of their main adult activities. So these butterflies literally become goo before transforming into the beautiful butterfly that we know and admire. So just this very concept of metamorphosis is associated with such a mysterious occurrence. Many scholars have also struggled with this text of Jesus' transfiguration. And while the struggle may be true, I do rest in the truth of this mysterious metamorphosis, both of God and of Jesus as a human, taking place in nature on a mountain among us. And one of the key things that we can see in this text is Peter's proclivity to just not get it. Now, I, for one, think the disciples often are not given the benefit of the doubt, that we look at them with a lot of hindsight bias when they don't get it. But also in the chapter before, Peter has experienced the whiplash of both confessing Jesus as the Messiah, the hinge point of the Gospel of Matthew, only to turn around and misunderstand it all again and hear Jesus say to him, "Get behind me, Satan." So we once again see Peter as bravely and boldly trying to get it. He is one of only 3 to witness this possibly overwhelming experience, and decided that, of course, let's stay here. Let's stay in this life-changing moment, and let's build an altar. Let's relish all that we can right here. But the key difference is that Jesus knows that transformation means that we can't stay in just one place. We must go out. We must apply all that has changed us. So while Peter was changed by what he witnessed, Jesus wanted to show him what it really means to be transformed. For us, I wonder if we also struggle with the same thing as Peter sometimes. That when we have these pivotal moments in our lives, these youth camp highs like I experienced throughout my childhood and teenage years, that it might feel easier to just camp out in those experiences and those feelings. I see Jesus as leading us toward that reminder to hold all things loosely instead. That certainly we can look back and remember always all that has changed us and formed us, but to be transformed is to sit in the mystery of it all and to use those altars of remembrance to proclaim what it is to be transformed. Richard Rohr speaks on comparing change with transformation. He says, transformation, though, is not the same as change. Change is when something new begins. Transformation, more often than not, happens when something old falls away. It happens after a crisis, when something we've learned to depend on is taken away. Not all of these, of course, leads to transformation. When something is taken away that you've grown used to or addicted to, you will either turn bitter or be transformed. In our society, we've undergone psychological change, cultural change, political change, economic change, worldview change. Most people throughout history have lived their life inside one paradigm or model. Most people have agreed upon one worldview. Yet there have been major paradigm shifts, maybe 4 or 5 times during just this century. Maybe that's why we have so many unhealthy people now. There has been massive change, but the change has not always led to transformation. When change unaccompanied by the transformation of the soul is demanded, people are often destroyed. So as Rohr said, it's not that change is obsolete. It's not that change isn't important. And it's not that change and transformation are complete opposites. Change is incredibly important for things to take place in our society. I see change as the policies that are in place to bring rights to all people, voting rights for women and people of color, removal of segregation, the Supreme Court ruling for marriage equality. These policies matter, and I plan to devote part of my life to advocating for policies and laws that make the city, state, and nation more just and equitable for all. But we have certainly seen how these changes have not necessarily been transformation for our country and for our world. Because people are still fighting to revoke these rights, much less just truly see all sexual orientations, races, and genders as equal. We have seen change, but we have also seen that without transformation, overt racist laws have morphed into mass incarceration for people of color and police brutality. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper knew that change was happening, that voting rights were coming, that slavery was ending, but she also knew that transformation was not really taking place. That until we all know we are all bound up together, as her speech went, we will not be truly transformed. With these important issues of our lives and with so much else, it is one thing to come to a belief in your mind, to understand something rationally, but it is a whole other thing to truly and deeply embody those beliefs that you arrive at. The truth is that we have embodied many things instead that we must unlearn, because we swim in the sea of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and fatphobia every day. So how might we embody instead these beliefs about equality that we have come to in our minds? Transformation happens through these aha moments sometimes. But I believe the true work of transformation is a lifelong process of being in relationship with people who are different than us, of listening every day to their voices. For God is often speaking through them to us, reminding us of what it is to be whole, of what it is to embody the belief that every single one of us is made in the image of God and worthy of love. As we embody that belief about others, we embody that belief about ourselves too. To be transformed is to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. To be transformed is to sit in the pain of this world without dismissing it, without hushing it, without squashing it with the platitudes of at least and it'll be fines. It is a wonder to learn how to simply sit in the pain with others. To encounter grief that is immeasurable and seemingly insurmountable, like the increasing number of deaths in Turkey and Syria. And to instead offer presence, even silence. This truly comforts, not just for one's own sake, but actually for the sake of the person in front of you. This Transfiguration Sunday, I hope we will all know, Wilshire, that we are being made new, one day at a time, and that as the old things fall away, we have the opportunity to become bitter or to be transformed. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper's poem, Only a Word, points us toward one of those. Till our world, so sad and weary, finds the balmy rest of peace. Peace to silence all her discords, peace till war and crime shall cease. Peace to fall like gentle showers, or on parched flowers dew, till our hearts proclaim with gladness, lo, God maketh all things new. O God, make all things new. Amen.